for bringing that with us to us as well. It was a very inspiring day for me to have that memory come back. Was very, very nice. And thank you for all you've done, all of you. But we'll move on. Madeline Salazar, Boeing Satellite Systems.
Good afternoon, Senator Fuller, Senator Allen, members of the Assembly. First of all, thank you so much for having us here. I feel honored and I feel humbled to be before you and to be on the same side as these amazing women and others in the audience today. I'll get to talk a little bit about my story, but first I'd like to begin. So I work for Boeing, and at Boeing we have the privilege of working on a variety of products, from the products that you see in the skies during the day to the stars at night. There's satellites, there's airplanes, there's products that help the brave men and women all over this world, and I feel honored to also be a part of that team. In my short 3 years out of college, I've had the opportunity to work in both satellites and airplanes at Boeing, and it's been an amazing experience. The 737-700 that got me here today is one of the ones that I get to work on every day. And I can be a little deceiving because when you see me walking down the street, and I'm sure other women in our field experience this, you would never think that I'm an aerospace engineer or that I get to actually work with the people who are designing and maintaining these airplanes or these satellites or these rockets. All these products are what we get to contribute to, and it's amazing. This year, Boeing celebrates its first 100 years, and I can't talk about the work that we do without recognizing all of the people who have contributed to these first 100 years, and we're excited for the next 100. So if you could, the next slide, yes, one more. I'll begin by talking about some of the STEM outreach that I've been involved with. So this is both at Boeing and personally. I'm excited to be here because we get to talk about the cool things that we do at our jobs, but most importantly because of the topic at hand, which is increasing and maintaining the number of women in STEM and the aerospace field. So I'll begin with a few slides that I actually get to present to students and parents who are learning about engineering and science, many times hearing about these fields for the first time. So my question is, and what does media portray engineers, scientists, researchers as? And usually it's something like this. This is the kind of, person that a fifth grade student, a middle school student, and a high school student thinks of when they hear the word engineer or scientist. But the truth is, and you could go to the next slide, it's regular people. It's women like us. It's people from diverse backgrounds. And to get people to think this way, to think that anyone can be an engineer, to get fifth grade Madeline to even consider the fact that she'd someday be on this kind of panel, it really is a collaborative effort. Boeing, like other companies, puts a lot of effort into being involved in the community and having these STEM outreach programs. And it's something that we have to work together with across companies, across the state, across the country, and across the world, because it's a global issue. If you go to the next slide. So my STEM journey. My parents are both from Mexico. They're immigrants of Mexico. My mom has a 6th grade education. My dad has an 11th grade education. So college, engineering, those were words that were not part of their vocabulary when I was growing up. But we knew that education was the only way that we would be able to be successful as a family. So I grew up in Boyle Heights in East LA. So it's usually known as East LA. The neighborhood is called Boyle Heights. It's not a neighborhood that's known for having, successful students come out or having anyone really get further than even high school. So This is not a unique story, though. There are many students, first-generation high school graduates, college graduates, that had the same experience that I did. And somehow, through a lot of mentorship, a lot of educators and counselors and people who took interest in our well-being, I ended up at MIT. And I remember taking my first flight from LA to MIT completely alone, completely unaware of what was ahead of me, and didn't know where that would take me. I'll talk a little bit about where my experience with what I call, or what we call, imposter syndrome began, and that was at MIT. So imposter syndrome, just as a quick definition, is this nagging feeling that you don't belong, that you don't deserve recognition, that at some point someone's going to figure out that you're actually not meant to be there. I'm feeling a little bit of that today. So, and the reason for that is because I came from Boa Heights and ended up at this great place called MIT with all these amazing students from all over the world. And I really felt like even when I was holding my diploma in my hand, someone was going to come by and say, this was not meant for you, let me take that back. And then I get to the workforce, and I feel that again. And it's because it's a new challenge. And so again, it's normal that I feel that again today, because there's amazing women sitting next to me. So I graduated MIT in 2013. My first job out of college, I graduated on a Friday. The next Friday, I was at Boeing Satellite Systems, and my role was an integration manager for satellites. The age gap between me and the rest of my peers in that role was at least 10 years. So a lot of imposter syndrome there too. But through, as these women have mentioned, hard work, dedication, and a lot of asking questions and learning from the different people, whether it's a technician or a senior engineer, having equal respect across the group led me to a good position in that role. From there, I work now in commercial airplanes, and it's the same experience again. But in general, we've gotten a hang of how to tackle problems and how to work with people. Another important part of my day is the community. So I've already mentioned how important it is for me to talk to students and introduce them to engineering. And so I've gotten the chance to do that through Boeing, through the co-founding of a nonprofit to target women, and through the co-founding also of a summer camp to teach students hands-on skills from the age of 5 through high school. So if you go to the next slide. So if I could summarize myself, and this is not to give you more information about me, but to give you the kind of important things, the kind of tasks that we have at hand while building the women in aerospace today, there's 3 things that I feel are really important. One is technical experience, and that comes through community and leadership. So those are 3 things: technical, community, and leadership. To me, that really defines me, and one can't work without the other 2, and they all have to always be together. So technical experience and community, it involves us being role models and mentors to the students at K through 12 level, specifically K through 5, and bringing them this technical experience early on. We have students who are teenagers and learning to build whole software by themselves. So let's encourage others to do that too. Those who may not necessarily always have the same resources, but can learn from the people who went through similar experiences. Kids can't be or can't be what they don't see. So they need to see role models in their community coming back and talking to them. And that's all part of leadership. And then I think there's one more slide. So this is the first 100 years at Boeing. You just wait to see what the next 100 will bring.
thank you. Now I'm going to give the men on the panel warning. After we have Kelly speak, I'm going to ask you to come up with some great questions, because as the first female Senate Republican leader ever, the guys helped a lot. Huh, Pat? Yeah. Because you have to be elected to that. So we would like the guys to give you some questions, and we'll give you a chance right after Kelly.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for having me. My name is Kelly Hennig. I work at Northrop Grumman. I'm a technologist there, and what that basically means is I look at our systems, I look at the architectures, and I find the limiters. So I find the things that stop us from being able to do better than what we're asked to do. I find the stuff that allow us to push and to basically come out with the next systems, the systems that are 20 years from now. And when I find those limiters, then I do research and development on ways to get around them. So I question, why can't I go faster? Why can't I hear better? Why can't I push this? And that leads me to develop new circuits, new devices, transistors, new systems altogether, new cooling mechanisms, new packaging, all of these types of things I get my hands on, and I'm able to design. I get to go in the lab and look at them, and I get to question and ask, why can't I make this better? And I have a huge team with me, and they're fantastic, and they work with me on that. Now, one of the things that I was, along those lines that I was brought up with, is that why? Why can't I? Why can't I do that? And my parents they told me I could do whatever I wanted to as long as I was willing to actually put the work into it, whatever I wanted to do. So whenever I asked why, they said, there's no reason why not. You go do it. And so from a very young age, I was taught that all I needed was hard work. And that served me very well, and I decided that I wanted to be an astronaut, I think like everybody else on this panel. So I decided I was going to be an astronaut. And all throughout grade school, I looked at this, and I didn't even think about the fact that there was, the differences between men and women or how many were there. I didn't even think about that. I was just going to do it because that's what I wanted to do. And then when I got to high school, one of the main things that kept me going, because high school is hard for lots of people, and sometimes you get discouraged or you kind of get pushed in different directions, was that I had a teacher who encouraged me to ask why. Now, a lot of times teachers don't necessarily like when you ask why, because they don't know the answer, and then they have to say, I don't know, in front of the entire class. And so not all teachers enjoy this. But I had a teacher one time, right before a test, and he was reviewing, and I asked why, or I said, what does that do? Why are we studying that? And he said, nobody's ever asked that. I've never asked that, and I don't know. If you go to the library right now and find the answer, you get 100. And so, yes, and so I ran off and I found the answer, I got 100. But he encouraged that, and that was something that was really positive, because a lot of times you run into kind of barriers with that along the way. Now, my high school continued on very nicely. I had a fantastic time. I didn't see many issues, or I wasn't aware of them. And even undergrad itself, I was, I guess, very, very blessed. I didn't notice any kind of differences. I was never treated differently, and I pursued my way through. Although I like to say that the reason I didn't become an astronaut is because I got excited about the technology to send us into space. But in actuality, I am terrified of heights, and I hate closed spaces. So, but we don't talk about that. It's because I like the technology. So I went into electrical engineering, and I decided I was going to develop the technology in order to be able to do that and to push it further and to go further into space. And so I graduated from Rutgers and went to the University of Michigan. Now, the University of Michigan was a little bit interesting for me. And the thing was, I had gone through life again thinking I could do anything I wanted. I could ask any question I want, and I could just keep going as far as I wanted. And I was a little bit naive because I had never experienced any kind of of gender discrimination of any kind. Everybody treated me, or I thought they treated me, very fairly. When I went to the University of Michigan, I was on a full fellowship, which basically meant I was free labor. So I got paid to go there, and I got paid to work there. And the professors didn't have to worry about me because somebody else is paying my bills. So I sat down with a professor, and I asked to talk with him about possibly helping him with his research. And I hadn't mentioned anything I was interested in. And I don't exactly know why he took the meeting, except perhaps he was confused by the name Kelly. But I got in there, and I sat down, and I didn't have the Jill then, so. I sat down, and he said, I'm sorry, our interests won't meet. And I said, excuse me? And I said, our interests won't meet. And I said, but we haven't even talked about those yet. And he said, no, we're done. And he looked away. And it was clear I was dismissed. And I got up, and I was still confused. Like, I still had no idea what happened. And I was wondering, did he talk to people? Did he know what I had been talking about? And I then went back to my office, who I shared with another graduate student. And he said, Kelly, it is known that he never accepts female graduate students. Now, at this point in time, I was flabbergasted. I couldn't believe that this was known and this was allowed to continue. And I was incredibly angry. But probably a couple days later, I met with another professor who I was looking to do work with, and that was Linda Katehi, and she's the chancellor of UC Davis right now. And Linda Katehi was the most amazing woman and professor I had ever talked to. The first thing was she was incredibly brilliant. She had a huge lab that she owned. She brought in a large amount of work to the university. She taught many classes, and all of her graduate students loved her. But one of the other things she was incredibly kind, warm, and generous. She was kind and warm and generous while being very ambitious and being very driven. And that was something that I had never, ever seen before, that combination of that. You know, normally when women are portrayed on TV and in the media as being driven or being a scientist that goes after their goals, they always appear ruthless or, you know, right? I mean, they look like they're going to rip your throat out. And the idea that you could... the idea that this professor could be so loved and yet so, just so driven and passionate really resonated with me. And I continue to see her as a mentor and see, that I can do that too. I don't have to be that. I can make my own brand of engineer. It doesn't have to be whatever the media is prescribing. So I graduated from the University of Michigan, and I started working immediately for Northrop Grumman, and I have worked there for 12 years. I am also married, and my husband works in the same department as I do, and we have, yes, I have a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old, and the one thing that I have been very blessed by is the current culture that now exists. Northrop, at least in my experience where I see there, they put a tremendous emphasis on the family unit. It's not necessarily women taking time off. It's not necessarily, giving more time. It's the family unit. And by making the rearing of children a shared responsibility, by making it part of the expectations for him as well as me, it allows me to continue to grow. If I say that I'm staying home, they expect him to stay home the next day. It's this shared go back and forth. And we're not the only couple that does this. My boss came in and said, my daughter is sick today. I have to stay home. It's like, oh, I understand that. I think my daughter had that yesterday. And I think that's very, very important, because I think that if we continue to make child rearing and call it a woman issue, then I think that it's not. I think that you're not spreading that responsibility. And once you start talking about it as being a family issue, as being part of the family unit, whatever that unit is, I think that you'll start seeing women participate greater, and you'll start seeing that kind of workload distribute. I think the other ladies had mentioned the importance of educating children very young in STEM, and I would like to reiterate that. But what I would like to also point out is I have a daughter, and again, she's 4, and the changes that have actually happened to toys for these kids this age, and everybody's nodding. When I was growing up, and there's even old Lego commercials where all of the Legos were gender neutral. They were all the same color, they all did it. Now my daughter is getting Frozen Legos. It's like, why do you have to have Frozen Legos? Why can't you have these Legos? And so now Legos are actually geared towards girls as being part of this princess themed. They're not geared toward them as far as the rocket ships or the fire trucks or the satellites. Instead, they're specifically shown as pink or purple or other things like that. And I try very hard to not do that and give them the gender neutral. But I think it's something that has slowly been creeping up and is actually something that didn't necessarily exist previously. So the other thing, my daughter made this. So this is a airplane, and it's backward. No, that's right. And this is the turbo, and these are the wings. So if you give them toys, regardless of what they are, if you give them things to just build or play with and any kind of imagination for these things, they will come up with things. And hopefully when they're older, they're better. But this is what they do. And they're naturally going to do this, and they're naturally going to grow to it. As long as you start just kind of giving them the little seed of that imagination, just a little tiny kind of push in that direction, they will rise to that. So thank you.
Any questions for our ladies? Sure.
Well, very inspiring presentations. I loved everyone, and I'm just thrilled to have you all here. I just wanted to ask Madeline a little bit about, thank you so much for sharing your story. Can you kind of think back to your background and tell us moments where this dream sort of became a reality? You sort of, I think you described the story well, and you talked about imposter syndrome. But what were some moments of critical moments of encouragement that made a huge difference? And then I'd also love it if you thought back to some friends that you grew up with that maybe had the same potential that you have that got tripped up along the way, and why that happened and how that happened, just to give some illustrative stories about the importance of this path and what we can do to help more young people get there.
So I remember key points, and for me, it just happened to be that there were key points. It will be different for everyone, and everyone's path is shaped by the environment that they grew up in. But as I mentioned, my parents didn't know English, didn't go to college. My father was the only one to make it into high school and didn't even graduate that. But and maybe it was those circumstances, the fact that we were in a low-income community, that we were a low-income family, that set it up to where we knew that education was the only thing that was going to make it possible for me and my sister, I have one sister, to move further than that. And that idea came from my parents' interactions with teachers. It was the interest that teachers had in the families in my community and really reiterating that. I know it seems like common sense now, like when we talk amongst people who have been educated, who have, who come from generations or are part of the generation that did go to college. But when you have immigrant families coming from all over the world, for us, Mexico, where 6th grade was pretty much as far as you went, it's a new concept to think about going to middle school, going to high school, going to college. And it can be scary to know that you don't even know how to get there. So the good thing is we knew that education was going to be a priority. from there, we knew that we needed to, and I say we, but it was mostly my mom, knew that we needed to find a career that was going to create job security, that was going to have job security. And for us, that came from engineering. And again, it was just like someone dropping a hint, someone talking about engineering and the kind of work that we could do as an engineer. So at some point, I was in 4th grade, and they said, well, engineering has job security and it pays well, so you're going to do engineering. And I was a rule follower, so with my parents said it, that I did it. But I also was very good at math and science, so it was because a teacher had said, she's really good at math and science, she's ahead of the curve there. Those lead to engineering and science. But again, I was the rule follower, and so it was because my parents said that I said, okay, yes, I'm going to be an engineer. But when it finally clicked for me, and when I felt it in me that I was meant, or I wanted to pursue it for myself, was through the involvement with a nonprofit. So again, I talk about mentorship and kids and students being able to see the kinds of the people that they can become. I continue to have that today. I'm a professional now, by all senses of the word, but where does it go from here? And so it's constant mentorship and having role models that show you what kind of person you can become. And so for me, that came through a nonprofit. It's a global, national nonprofit called Great Minds in STEM. And what they do is they come to communities like mine. They bring engineers from similar communities. They give us hands-on experience. I remember building a mousetrap vehicle, a marshmallow bridge, and having these interactions with both the engineers and the products that made it feel like something I could do. And it clicked for me. And at the time, I wanted to be a structural engineer because I wanted to work on roller coasters at Disneyland. And so now I knew for a fact that it was me who wanted that. From there on, it continued, again, the mentorship from both professionals in the field, from educators in high school, being involved with the MESA is the program that I was involved with in high school, continuing with these kinds of hands-on competitions, and the encouragement of these mentors. Yes, you're meant for that. Yes, you can do it. Ended up doing summer programs at UC Berkeley, at MIT, at Harvard, and now the kinds of words that were never part of my vocabulary, never part of my parents' vocabulary, became regular conversations. And from there on, I went to MIT, never knowing I could be accepted. Felt very blessed to have been, and continuing that encouragement. One thing I will say is that I always went back, and STEM outreach, just outreach in general, is a passion. It's something that grows on someone when you've gone through a journey like mine. Remember being in middle school, going back to my elementary school, being in high school, going back to my middle school. So I can think of a lot of people who didn't end up where they thought they would be. And I'll use just...
And I'm going to have to kind of wrap it up because we have 3 more panels and 30 more minutes. But we want one more question on this panel, and then we're going to seat the next one.
You could just finish that?
Yes.
You were about to get to an important thought.
Parents' involvement, I think, made the difference. Having a parent involved and constantly, knowing where the student was in terms of their peers, I think was what made the difference between me and those that I saw didn't get there.
Thank you. Senator Bates, and then we'll seat the next panel and go for some more questions.
Actually, I think my question might take too long for you all to answer, but believe me, a number of us up here at times have had the imposter syndrome. My question is, when did you know that you were good at math in particular? Because science can be something that's more in the biological rather than things that are more technical in nature. Because it seems to me that's where the divide happens with women. You're not good in math. I was good in math up to a certain point. And then when I hit, I think it was geometry, I did okay, but I got moved over there because I wasn't good enough. And I don't know whether it was specifically testing or whatever, because I got good grades. And I think that's what happens. So if we start back in preschool and we start encouraging whatever that is in our brains, and that helps that grow and expand, that's probably the difference for that you all had, but it wasn't purposeful. It just happened. So you must have known intrinsically that you were good at it, and you weren't going to have someone say you weren't. So how do we get that into preschool so that with young girls? Because I do believe we get directed away from it, and it's not so purposeful. I don't think it was mean-spirited or we want to keep women down. I just think that was initially just an assumption that we don't have the kind of brains that can get us where you guys are. And we might have all wanted to be astronauts, but gave up when we found out we weren't good at math at some point in time. So I don't necessarily know if you were really good or not, but I think we say that without really any evidence that you aren't good or not. And I think it's something that we fall back on when we get into a little bit of a rut. I also think that it's something that people overhear. So they overhear other women start saying, I'm not good at math, or I'm not as good at math, or I didn't do that because I'm not good at math. And once you start hearing, especially young girls in those kindergarten and preschool classes, start hearing teachers or educators or anybody who they're exposed to say that, then they start associating that as something that women say. And I think we need to just stop saying that. So stop saying you're bad at math. That some of us perhaps did. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's where we need the confidence building.
Senator Hadley.
Well, thank you. Each story more inspiring than the last. I'll go quick out of respect for the senator's time and the agenda. Just lightning round here. If you could pick, a girl, young woman of any age to spend a half an hour with, I know that earlier is better, but you also have the benefit of seeing potential and helping them. What grade, what age would you love to spend a half an hour with a girl or a young woman?
I'll say 6th grade, transition from elementary school to middle school.
I was going to say 7th grade, so right when you're just definitely that pre-high school, a couple years in there, 7th grade.
I'd probably go a little younger, probably 2nd to 3rd.
Wow.
Just I really believe in it happens really young. Mm. You get segregated.
I'm gonna do preschool.
Yeah.
I'm gonna, because they're so funny then too, and they have no sense of.
I think it gets locked. I think I'm totally with that.
And they're
colors, dresses. Not that I don't like dresses, but
yes.
Well, my youngest daughter's a freshman in high school. I hope I'm not too late. But thank you so much for your testimony, your stories.
Before we move on to the next thing, I would like to invite Assemblywoman Autumn Burke to join us up here. We'd love to have you. And I'd also, sorry, you don't have to, but we're just thrilled to have you. And I'd like to note, Assemblymember Cooley would like to make one quick announcement.